Here we are. Talked about my favorite books. I've talked about some other things. We're going to talk about my least favorite books of 2022. And I have a lot. I read 96 books in the year of 2022, and that's a really great reading year for me. But with reading that many, of course, there's going to be some that I did not like. I was disappointed by. I had really high expectations for, but fell through. I'm going to talk about all those today. I could do a separate video of my least favorite versus my most disappointing, but I put them all in one video. It's just easier because I don't like coming on my channel and being like, I'm ready to bash some books. I don't want to do that. It's cathartic, yes, I will say, because it gets venting of feelings out, but it's not something I like to do because with everything, let's just go ahead and get the disclaimer out there. If you enjoy any of these books, that's great. You do you. I didn't enjoy them, but I'm so glad you personally did, and that's okay. Everyone has different tastes. I have best friends that enjoy a book that I absolutely loathe. They loathe a book that I absolutely love, but we're still best friends. And that's just how it goes. Everyone has different opinions and taste, and that is okay. So if I talk about any book today that you love and you're like, how dare she? I'm sorry. It's okay. I'm so glad you loved it. You keep loving it. You do you. And I still think you're great. But I'm not gonna hold anything back. Let's just get into it. I'm just gonna go with what I see first on the stack here, because that's right, I have a stack. Number one, I seen on TV on Married to the Shore. We made this our group read for Gilmore-a-thon, which was a readathon I co-hosted, and we read it because a tagline from one of my favorite authors, Abby Hamezen, says, "Adorable and steamy fun that's full of Gilmore Girls vibes." That was wrong. This book was about nothing. It had no plot line. It had no great characters. It had no good relationship. It was boring. It was bleh. Like, I really pushed myself through this one. I would have DNF'd it if not for the readathon, and in fact being the buddy read of the whole thing, because it was just that boring. It's about a girl that becomes a journalist and she decides to go to a town that's much like Stars Hollow, but it's not, and that is it. That is all that happens. And it's boring. That's the biggest complaint I have with this book, is that it's boring. So, Runtime by Catherine Ryan Howard. I had such high expectations for this book. It's not like one of my least favorite books I've ever read, but it's a disappointment, I would say, because this is all about a actress that gets a job being a leading lady in a horror movie in the middle of the woods, and you're like, yes, I want to read that book, yes. And I was like, this is going to be so good, but it wasn't. I think the author could have done so much more with this, and with this author, I've read two other of her books, and she has such good plots, like the ideas for them, like the overall themes and plot lines are amazing, but the execution of them always falls flat for me. This one mostly in particular. Could have been so much more, but it wasn't. I wanted it more focused on the horror movie making process, so much more of the isolation in the middle of the woods, but it wasn't that at all for me. This one's varying. A lot of people love this book. Me, I did not. I just felt like it could have been more, and it wasn't. I gave it a 3, and I will stand by that. So it's not like a complete least favorite book I've ever read in my life, but I wanted it to be more, and it wasn't. But speaking of a book that I didn't like really at all, Hague by Kiersten White. Again, another amazing idea for a book. This is all about a hide-and-seek contest in this old abandoned amusement park where things are going to get scary. And you're like, I want to read this. Yes, that sounds amazing. Me too. I mean, the book even has a map inside of it. Like, it's cool. The cover's cool. All signs point to amazing. It was not. It was boring. Also, it read like a YA book. The characters were all really young. There was no really scary factors. And take that from me as like a huge scaredy cat. If I didn't think it was scary, it really wasn't scary. Like, they could have done so much more with the whole hide and seek aspect and at night, and they didn't do that. It just was so blah. And even the end was blah. I was like, really? And also, it's short. Like, it's only 240 pages. Like, that's a really short horror novel in my opinion. So this one was a big disappointment and a true least favorite. Like, this one I was really did not a fan of. And honestly, I haven't seen a good review yet of it, if I'm being 100% honest with any of my friends on BookTube. Haven't seen it. But one that's also kind of in the middle, The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. I have such a love-hate relationship with Lucy Foley because the first book I read from her, The Guest List, I loved. I gave it a 5 out of 5. It was one of my favorite thrillers that year that I read it, and I had a good time. And then I read The Hunting Party by her, and I loathed it. became one of my least favorite books. And then we have this one showing up on my least favorites list. I have learned with Lucy Foley is that she writes a lot of really unlikable characters. Like, that's kind of her shtick. And that's okay. I think that's great. There's some books that really do well with that, much like The Guest List and My Dreams I Hold a Knife. Love both of those books, both full of unlikable characters that I loathe, but somehow they work. But then you have these two that I'm talking about, Lucy Foley, and this one in particular, The Paris Apartment, full of unlikable characters, had a whole bunch of different storylines and characters that I did not care about. This is about a girl that like she loses her apartment, so she moves into her brother's apartment in Paris, only he's not there, and they can't figure out where he is, and she becomes like kind of like Sherlock Holmes, trying to figure out where he's at and learning more about the apartments, like people that live there, and it's boring. It's boring. I didn't care about anybody, didn't care about what happened. The ending was boring. I don't know. Speaking of disappointments, The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I've seen this on a lot of people's least favorite lists. And yeah, I love Riley Sager books. We all know. A couple of his books have been my all-time favorites. I really enjoy his writing. They're just fun, fast-paced thrillers, but this one was just a huge disappointment. It had an unlikable main character I didn't care about. It had a very weird paranormal plot line that I don't think made sense, but that didn't bother me so much. It was not up to par with the usual Riley Sager books. I just did not enjoy it. Wasn't a good time for me at all. So sadly, yeah, I'm gonna have to put it on there. And the last two books I want to talk about are not necessarily like least favorite books. I would say they're just disappointments to me. Were The Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I went into this expecting to love it because everyone and their mother loves it. Like, it was very apparent that it was a very popular book a couple years ago. Even last year with the movie coming out, Reese Witherspoon picked it up. She made it into a movie. I tried watching the movie, couldn't get into it. The book is just, and like, it's not horrible, but I just don't think it's as great as everyone says it is. I might be alone in that, but it just was kind of, it was just kind of meh is the word I would use to describe it. So it wasn't necessarily like I loathe this book, but it was more of like, I don't get the hype, really. I could do a whole video on that probably of, I don't get the hype on these books. If you want that, let me know. This is definitely my #1 contender for that one. I did not like it. Again, also, The Last Thing You Told Me by Laura Dave. Another one, I don't get the hype. That one, I always will say, is a product of Miss Market. It was marketed as a mystery thriller, but it's clearly not. It's a woman's fiction. I think I would have liked it so much more knowing that going into it, but it was mismarketed. I'll stand by that for a long time. And the last book I'm talking about today is The Midnight Library by Matt Hague. This one, again, a lot of people love, so take this with a grain of salt. I just did not get the hype with this book. It's about a character that maybe thinks about ending her own life, and she gets an opportunity to basically live her life if she would have made X, Y, and Z choices. And we go through her life with that. And I just didn't find it as thought-provoking as a lot of people else did. I didn't find it very, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, really gripping, heartwarming, and just, you know, intense, I guess you could say the word is. I just didn't find that in this book at all. I didn't loathe it. Again, it's kind of like Where the Crawdads Sing, where I just don't get the hype. It wasn't 100% there for me, so that's why I'm putting them on this list, is because I don't get it. I don't get the hype on them. That's it. So there you have my least favorite books of the year. Overall, like, I only talked about maybe like 6 or 7, maybe 8 books. 8 books out of 96 is not that bad, honestly. I mean, I think I'm pretty fair in a lot of books, but sometimes I just read a book where I'm just like, oh crap, this is just, it's gonna be hard. So, you know, we just have to talk about them because it happens to everybody. You always go into a book with the best expectations, and sometimes they are met, and sometimes they are not even close to being met, and these are that book. So I'd love to know what books that you thought you were going to love this year, but sadly didn't, that you just kind of loathed. So let me know in the comments. And again, if you liked any of these books, great. I'm happy for you. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.